Welcome to AlexGs Aquarium, everybody. Today I want to talk about the 1600 gallon system, give a bit of a general update about how the tank's doing, how the fish are doing, how the live rock's doing, protein skimmer, and then I want to talk more about one specific topic, and that is humidity control. Now, I had a video that I released a few months back that talked specifically about the humidity mitigation measures that I'm taking on the 1600 gallon system. I want to talk a little bit about what worked, what didn't quite work, and the corrections that I made to allow my humidity to be controlled properly within this environment. Let's go ahead, first talk about the fish in the 720 gallon tank. The damsels have been doing great. The sea urchin, the handful of snails, and a couple of brittle stars I have in here as well. They're kind of spread into the 480 and the 150 in the back. Everything's doing good. The algae, as you'll notice, is not really too apparent on the rocks. Last week when I had my live rock and live sand video, there was actually quite a bit of algae starting to grow everywhere, and I was getting a pretty big bloom of it. I have cleaned my glass this week, and it really, I noticed once the live rock was added to the system that the algae bloom actually kind of started to die off a little bit. I also want to look at the live rock and back along with the live sand real quick just so you guys see what's going on with those. We'll talk about the protein skimmer for just a minute, and then we'll move back into talking about humidity control for the 1600 gallon system. 480 gallon tank is looking good. Still a little bit of algae growing on everything here. You can see my one sea urchin. I just moved him over here from the 720 gallon tank since they're starting to get a little bit of algae growth in here. He's doing real well. The handful of hermit crabs I have in here are also doing well. The live sand, of course, is in here, and it is also doing well. One thing I really want to talk about a little bit that has happened with the 480 and the 720 gallon tank since the rock has been added is copepods. I have started to notice a lot of pods in all the tanks. I know the damsels in the 720 gallon tank are ecstatic about it because I could see them eating them as they come out of the return pump line and also where they're walking around on the glass. I've noticed the same thing in the 480 gallon tank, although it's not really present right now since I cleaned the glass. I've started to notice a lot of pods walking around. The protein skimmer is still kicking, and it seems to be doing all right. I actually have made a little bit of skimmate in the cup. It's kind of fluctuated from day to day on how much foam's getting made, and I really attribute that there just not really being much in the way of bioload. You can see there's a pretty dark ring here where there's some foam that's collected and dirt along with the neck of the skimmer. I'll probably clean that in the next week or so. I did move the gate valve back to this side so I could better control the water flow in here, and I also made a little bit taller exit line for the protein skimmer so the water has to come up a little higher. As you can see, I've got the water line up a little higher, which helped it lift into the neck of the skimmer. Definitely be more of an update on that as things kind of progress with it. The live rock. All I could say is this stuff looks awesome. There is a ton of life coming out of this. I actually have some tunicates here. I'll try to zoom in on them. Several different macroalgaes. Get this red macroalgae. There's actually sea bases that have been coming out, other little tunicates, sponges, all kinds of worms have been present. And I'd say at count right now, I've got probably about 10 different species of macroalgae starting to emerge from this rock. And just an enormous amount of pod life. I did not expect there to be as many pods as there are. Yeah, there's one there moving around. They're all over the glass. There's all kinds of small worms starting to come out as well. The mantis shrimp's not out today, but she has actually erected herself a nice little cave that's double-ended. There's an entryway on this side. She kind of blocks and unblocks at her will, and another one on the other side. It's looking really good though. I'm very impressed with this rock and the life that's come out of it. I actually did get a little bit of Chado at the store. Overall, everything in here is looking good. Overall, the tank's doing really well. Shifting gears towards humidity mitigation, I'll just quickly overview the steps I've taken. Ventilation here with the humidistat that turns on automatically, and well, exhaust about 110 cubic feet per minute of air out. I've plastified the ceiling to help contain the humidity and also made this canopy system to help better contain the humidity within this space so the fan could deal with it. Tops have also been added to the 265 gallon, one section of the 150, and finally the 120 gallon here, which is kind of cluttered right now. The big question, of course, is did the humidity mitigation measures I put in place do their job properly? Well, kind of a yes and no answer. Was this enough to control the humidity alone? Somewhat, but not quite enough, unfortunately. That ventilation will vent about 110 cubic feet per minute of air, which means about every 15 to 20 minutes the air inside of this enclosure behind me in the fish room should be getting exchanged, or at least that volume of air. Unfortunately though, one of the things that I started to notice was there was a humidity creep happening. I started monitoring humidity as I started to heat the tanks. And I did that with a couple of instruments. I went and got a couple of temperature and humidity monitors. They're just Accurites. I got them on Amazon. I got 2 of them. They were like 20 bucks. Great little tool though. This thing will tell you what your current room temperature is. It will tell you what your current humidity level is and whether or not it thinks it's satisfactory, which you can kind of, take it or leave it on their little guide. But one of the nice things it also does is it tells you a 24-hour high and low for your humidity and your temperature. And that's a great tool. Now I took one of these and I put it into the main basement area, which is the one I'm holding now. I also took another one and put it into the fish room. I started writing down the humidity and temperature levels of the basement, the fish room, along with the tank temperature that was reading in the Ranco controller. I wanted to see what kind of correlation there was. Unfortunately, over time, the humidity in the whole basement was starting to get into the 60s, and in that percentage, that's on a pretty high end. Unfortunately, the fish room was kind of reacting off of that and actually getting higher and higher off of that. I kind of decided that more was needed once I had a high of 78% humidity read in the fish room area. And this was very concerning to me because my goal is to keep the humidity level under 70% in that room and as low as I can out here. Unfortunately, the ventilation on its own just couldn't do it. And I needed another solution. And I know several people made comments about it and said, well, you need more ventilation, you could use an air exchanger. Well, I went with something I already had at the house, and that's a dehumidifier. Dehumidifiers work to remove humidity from the air and turn it back into liquid water by condensing it into that liquid. I had a dehumidifier already. I started by first putting it in the main part of the basement. And when I did that, the humidity level in the basement dropped dramatically. The temperature rose slightly due to the heat being put off by the dehumidifier, but it still wasn't causing any kind of detriment to the tank, raising the tank's temperature from the excess heat in the room. But one thing I did notice though is that the humidity in the fish room really wasn't lowering down a whole lot. It started to level off, but it was still getting into that 70% range. And I really wanted to get it down into the 60s. I finally took my dehumidifier and kind of rigged it up so that it goes into the fish room through a dryer vent. Let's take a look. The dehumidifier you can see is behind me right now. It just has a 4-inch duct that's used for a dryer to go straight into the fish room wall, into the back walkway there. I kind of taped it off and made it so that it has to draw air from that. That's why you see some of the blue painter's tape on there. I also taped off some of the grill on the front. Just put a little piece of filter floss on the front end of it to get any dust that might come in, or salt spray hopefully. I have it turned off right now, but normally I let this run 24/7, and it has a hose that goes to my sump pit. Since I've started doing that, I've gotten humidity down into the high 40% range in here at times, with it peaking out at about the mid 60s. And as far as the humidity level goes throughout the day, I gotta say, I'm pretty happy with that. Big question, of course, is why? Why do you have to control humidity like this? What would it do if it's not controlled? Well, the biggest thing is it could really damage your home. And I mean, it could damage it to the point to where you can't live in it anymore. It could become a health hazard. Humidity in your home over 80% is the ideal environment for mold to be able to grow. I chose to stay at 70% or lower for my humidity to stay away from that as much as I can. Thus far, it's working. I will say if I run into any other kinds of humidity issues, which I think it's pretty well set now, but if it does happen, I'm probably going to take the next step of getting a larger dehumidifier to handle this. This is a moderately sized 40 quart per day unit. Understand too with dehumidifiers, if you do purchase one, get something that's got a decent energy rating. This is one I had, but it was Energy Star rated. Make sure you have a hose hookup to go to your sump pit or a drain line. And take a little time to read about them and find out how efficient they are and how well they are looked at. Some of them actually have a humidistat built in to where you can control what the humidity level is, which of course you pay a little bit more, but it's something to consider. Also consider the amount of humidity that could really be pulled out. This is a 40 quart per day unit, which I think roughly comes into around the 5 gallon range. If you really aren't pulling that much water out, getting a larger unit won't necessarily let it draw more out of the air. Just keep that in mind. Overall though, I think that the humidity control measures that I have in there with kind of blocking it off and trying to contain this humidity have really helped me out. I'd say about once a week right now, my top off level is about 20 gallons of RODI water, which considering the size of this system and the open space between both big tanks and 2/3 of the 150 gallon refuge tank, I think my top off from evaporation is actually pretty good. And that's why I don't want my humidity levels to get too low, because it's going to encourage more evaporation to take place. And I don't want to do that. I'm really interested to hear everybody's comments, questions on this topic, as I think it's a really interesting one to discuss more, along with some of the other measures that could be put in place, some of the pluses, minuses. As I said, I looked at air exchangers and ultimately decided it really wouldn't help me in the climate that I'm in for part of the year when it would be needed the most. And if you like today's video, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. Let me know I'm doing a good job. If you didn't like the video, you can give me a thumbs down too, that's okay. Of course, if you want to see more on the 1600 gallon system, go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I put out a video at least once a week. It is really starting to become an exciting time for this tank, as I'm starting to add some fish to it. In the next few months, I'll be finishing off all the equipment that I need on this tank, and finally start to get into a little bit more of keeping corals in the tank. I'm going to put a few more fish in the tank because I want to get a little bit higher bio load. 3 fish at 1600 gallons really isn't doing a whole heck of a lot. And the live rock addition does help, but I still want to put a little bit more in here to help build the biological system of this tank nice and steady. Thanks again for watching everybody, and I'll see you on the next video.